My son found out I was working nights as a security guard to pay for his college. Our relationship was never the same. I, 47M, never wanted my son to know about this. For 3 years, I've been working as a night security guard at a local warehouse, in addition to my day job as an accountant. The plan was simple: save enough to help him through college without drowning in debt. Yesterday, everything fell apart. It started when I got a call from him during my night shift. He never calls that late, so I immediately knew something was wrong. His voice was shaky when he asked, "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" My stomach dropped. Somehow, he'd found out. Looking back, I should have known I couldn't keep it hidden forever. The exhaustion was getting harder to hide, and the excuses for missing family dinners were wearing thin. My wife noticed, of course. She'd been against the idea from the start, saying we should just take out loans like everyone else. But I couldn't bear the thought of my son starting his adult life buried in debt. The warehouse job wasn't glamorous, but it paid decent money for night work. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., I'd patrol the empty halls, check the security cameras, and occasionally deal with false alarms. Then I'd catch a quick shower, change into my suit, and head straight to the accounting firm. Coffee became my best friend, and power naps in my car during lunch breaks kept me going. For 3 years, I managed to keep both worlds separate. My son thought I was just working late at the firm sometimes, or had early morning meetings. The few times he visited me at the office, I made sure it was during regular hours. I even kept a fresh suit hanging in my car to avoid any suspicions. But yesterday changed everything. He'd stopped by the warehouse to pick up a package, something about a delayed delivery he needed for a project, and there I was, in my security uniform, doing my rounds. The look on his face, I'll never forget it. Confusion, then recognition, then something between hurt and anger. I tried to explain right there, but he just turned and walked away. That's when he called me an hour later. I could hear him fighting back tears as he told me how he'd piece things together. The constant tiredness, the missed family events, the way I'd sometimes fall asleep during weekend movies. He'd noticed it all, but never connected the dots until seeing me there. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" he asked. "Did you think I wouldn't understand?" His words hit hard because he was right. I'd convinced myself I was protecting him, but maybe I was just protecting my own pride. I didn't want him to feel guilty about the sacrifices I was making, but in trying to shield him, I'd ended up hurting him more. The truth is, education costs have skyrocketed since my time in college. My regular salary alone wouldn't have been enough to help him, not without taking on massive debt. I remember my own father working multiple jobs to put me through school, and how that shaped my view of parental responsibility. But times have changed, and maybe my old school thinking about handling everything myself was outdated. Now, sitting in this empty warehouse at 3 a.m., writing this out on my phone, I'm trying to figure out how to fix things. My son's anger comes from a place of love and concern. He's worried about my health, about the toll these double shifts have taken. He's right about that too. I'm not as young as I used to be, and these past 3 years have aged me more than I'd like to admit. The irony is, we're only 6 months away from having enough saved for his final year. 6 more months of double shifts, of stolen naps, of missing family dinners. But now that he knows, I'm not sure I can continue. Not because I'm ashamed of the work, there's dignity in any honest job, but because the cost of keeping this secret has become higher than any amount of money I could save. The morning after our confrontation, I came home to find my son sitting at our kitchen table. He'd clearly been waiting for me, 2 cups of coffee steaming in front of him. The sight reminded me of when he was younger, waiting up to show me his report cards. But this time, there was no excited smile, just tired eyes that matched my own. "You look exhausted, Dad," were his first words. Not angry anymore, just concerned. He'd brought printouts, my warehouse pay stubs he'd somehow gotten hold of, bank statements showing the separate account where I'd been storing the night job money, even medical articles about sleep deprivation. My son, ever the thorough researcher, just like his mother. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest I've ever had. He'd calculated everything, how many hours I was actually sleeping, how much money I'd managed to save, and the toll it was taking on my health. He'd even noticed my hand tremors from too much caffeine, something I thought I'd hidden well. What broke me wasn't his anger, but his offer. He'd spent the night applying for part-time jobs himself, determined to take over some of the financial burden. He'd also reached out to his academic advisor about switching to a work-study program. "I can't let you kill yourself for my education," he said, sliding over a resignation letter he'd drafted for my warehouse job. I tried explaining that this wasn't his burden to bear, that parents are supposed to sacrifice for their children. But he countered with something that made me pause. And children are supposed to learn from their parents. What am I learning from watching you work yourself to death in secret? The conversation was interrupted by my wife coming downstairs. She took one look at the papers spread across the table and knew. I'd kept this from her too, though I suspect she'd figured it out long ago. She just sat down and started sharing her own observations, how my blood pressure medication dosage had doubled in the past year, how I'd stopped going to my weekly basketball games, how I'd aged 10 years in 3. Then my son dropped another bombshell. He'd been offered a prestigious internship for the summer, one that could lead to a full-time position after graduation. But he was planning to turn it down in favor of a higher-paying retail job to help with tuition. The internship paid less, but the career opportunities it offered were invaluable. That hit me hard. In trying to secure his financial future, I was potentially damaging his career prospects. The whole point of working these extra hours was to give him opportunities, not take them away. But my son, in his determination to help, was about to make the same kind of sacrifice I'd been making. My wife, who'd been quietly listening, finally spoke up. She reminded us of her parents' offer from 2 years ago. They'd wanted to help with tuition, but I'd refused out of pride. They'd built a successful small business and were comfortable in retirement, but I'd been adamant about handling it ourselves. Sometimes, she said, refusing help is more selfish than accepting it. As I sat there, watching my coffee grow cold, I realized how tangled everything had become. My second job had started as a simple solution to a financial problem, but it had grown into something else, a test of my worth as a father, a measure of my self-reliance, a secret that was eating away at our family's trust in each other. My son reached across the table and did something he hadn't done in years. He held my trembling hands steady. The same hands that had taught him to ride a bike, helped him with his math homework, and now ached from typing reports all day and gripping a flashlight all night. "Dad," he said quietly, "you've always taught me that family means being there for each other. Let us be there for you too." That conversation led to many sleepless nights, though for once, not because of work. My son insisted on showing me his complete financial plan. He'd mapped out everything, his scholarship opportunities, the potential earnings from his internship, and even the long-term career benefits versus immediate financial gains. The kid I'd been trying to protect was now protecting me and doing a better job of it than I'd done. After much discussion and several family meetings, we reached a compromise. I would keep the warehouse job for 1 more month, just long enough to train my replacement and ensure a smooth transition. My son would take the internship, focusing on his career development rather than immediate earnings. And yes, we would accept his grandparents' help, though not their full offer. They were surprised and delighted when we finally called. The hardest part wasn't giving up the second job. It was accepting that my way wasn't the only way, or even the best way. My son showed me research about how parental stress affects children, articles about the importance of family time over financial abundance, and statistics about student debt versus career opportunities. He'd clearly inherited his mother's practical wisdom along with my stubborn determination. Last week was my final shift at the warehouse. My coworkers there, good people I'd worked alongside for 3 years but never really known, threw me a small goodbye party. My son insisted on coming. He wanted to thank them for looking out for me all those nights, something I hadn't even realized they'd been doing. Watching him chat and laugh with them, I saw him in a new light, not just as my child to protect, but as a young man capable of understanding and appreciating sacrifice. The changes were immediate. Within days of returning to normal sleep patterns, my hands stopped shaking. My wife says the dark circles under my eyes are fading. Last weekend, for the first time in years, I played a full game of basketball with my old friends. I was terribly out of shape, but it felt good to be moving again, to be living instead of just surviving. My son and I have started a new tradition, Sunday morning coffee together before he heads back to campus. We talk about his classes, his internship plans, and yes, about money too. But now the conversations are open, honest, and shared. He's teaching me about investment apps and modern financial planning, while I share what I've learned about the value of time over money. Yesterday, he asked me something that stopped me in my tracks. "Dad, what would you have done if I hadn't found out?" The truth is, I don't know. Pride and stubbornness might have kept me going until I broke down completely. By trying to be strong for my family, I was actually becoming their weakness. The money we saved isn't going to waste. Combined with his grandparents' help and his internship earnings, it's enough to see him through graduation without crushing debt. But the real value of these past few months isn't in the dollars saved. It's in the lessons learned. About trust, about family, about the different forms of strength. I look at my son now and see not just the child I wanted to protect, but the man who helped me understand that sometimes the strongest thing a parent can do is accept help. He's learned something too. Not the lesson I intended about financial responsibility, but perhaps a more important one about family, honesty, and the true cost of secrets. This morning, I woke up naturally for the first time in years. No alarm clock needed. As I write this, I can hear my wife and son in the kitchen arguing playfully about the right way to make pancakes. In a few minutes, I'll join them, fully present, fully awake. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm truly providing for my family, not just with money, but with my presence, my attention, and my love. Sometimes the hardest lessons come from our children. Mine taught me that being a good father isn't about bearing every burden alone. It's about showing our kids how to face life's challenges with honesty, grace, and the strength to accept help when needed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.